All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD 1000 Web Development Technologies class, I've been going through a series of videos, or I've been creating a series of videos based on the Mozilla Developer Network Learn Web Development series. I am currently in the Structuring the Web with HTML, Multimedia, and Embedding, and I'm talking about responsive images. Now, as it says here, responsive images are images that work well with widely differing screen sizes. All right. So, as it says, they're just one part of responsive design, which we will talk about later when we get into CSS. So why do you want responsive images? You know what? You've already seen this. You noticed that earlier when we had the picture of the dinosaur, when we skewed it, it looked funky when you had the screen at a certain size. So it says, let's look at a typical scenario here. A typical website may contain a header image, some content below the header, etc. All right. The header image will likely span the whole width of the header, and the content image will be inside. So this would be the header image, and this would be the content. You want it to look nice, whether you're looking at this on a desktop computer, a laptop computer, a tablet, or a phone. All right. Sometimes what that'll mean is if the device is small enough, you may not even show a certain image. All right. It just may not resonate well enough on there. So as it says, what they show here works well on a widescreen device like a laptop or desktop. All right, it says we won't discuss CSS much in this lesson except to say a few things. First, the body content here was set to a max width of 1200 pixels. All right. It says in viewports below that width, the body will stay at 100% of the width of the viewport. Well, what does that mean? 1200 pixels is not going to cut it for a phone. A phone is typically going to have about half that many pixels. All right. The header image has been set so that its center always stays in the center of the header no matter what width the heading is set at. So if the site, as it says there, is being viewed on a narrower screen, the important detail in the center can still be seen. And it's 200 pixels high. Finally, the content images have been set so that if the body becomes smaller than the images start to shrink automatically. So you can see that right here. All right. It says issues arise when you start to view this on a narrow screen size. The header below looks okay, but it's starting to take up a lot of the screen height. So in other words, you can still read it, but the width, or the height rather, is a lot higher there than it is here compared to the size of your screen. All right. An improvement, as it says, would be to display a cropped version of the image, which displays the important details on a narrower screen. A second cropped image could be displayed on a medium width device like a tablet. It says this is commonly known as the art direction problem. Now, the idea with this is, do you want one image that you're going to scale, or do you possibly want multiple images and you change the image that's shown based on the type of device that you're using? All right. It says, in addition, there's no need to embed such a large image on pages when it's being put on a mobile screen. And small raster images start to look grainy when displayed larger than their original size. They call this the resolution switching problem. Conversely, it says it is unnecessary to display a large image on a screen significantly smaller than the size it was meant for. It's not just that it's a waste of bandwidth, but in many ways it looks very unprofessional, which is of course not what you're going to be looking for, all right, as the size shrinks. So this is one reason that quite often you start to do things like, and we're going to get into this in the CSS section, but things like media queries, where when your screen resolution when it reaches a certain size, you don't even show the image anymore. All right. It says you might think that vector image would solve these problems, and to a certain degree they do. However, even vectors aren't suitable for all image types. As it says there, it's simple. Vector images work great with simple graphics. All right. But the kind of detail that you need in a photo to be able to build that with a scalable vector graphic, it's just not conducive time-wise and effort-wise. All right. It says this problem didn't exist when the web first existed in the mid-90s. Back then, the only devices in existence were desktops and laptops. Well, that's changed. As it says there, responsive image technologies were implemented to solve the problem that you have with smaller devices. All right. So, how do you create responsive images? Okay, it says in this section we'll look at two problems illustrated above and show how to solve them using HTML's responsive image features. You should note we will be focusing on images for this section. All right. And not so much CSS. CSS, as it says, has better tools for responsive design, and we will talk about them later when we get to the CSS portion of this video series. So what's the problem we want to solve with resolution switching? We want to display identical image content, just larger or smaller, depending on the size of the device. All right. So it says here, the standard image only lets you point to a single file. However, as mentioned right here, you can use the source set and the sizes attributes to provide several additional images. So notice where there was just the one here. Now what we're saying is it's going to be size dependent. So, as mentioned below, these are not that difficult to understand if you format them in the way as shown above. So let's see. It says you can see this in our responsive HTML. So what is this? Well, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start making this smaller. All right. Doesn't really look like much has changed. In fact, this is not responsive at all. All right, we are moving this over, but this is looking grainy actually from the get-go. This, the actual text we have in here, as you can see, is not responsive. All right. So as mentioned here, when you use the source set and the sizes attributes, the source set defines the set of images that allow the browser to choose between based on the size that we're using. All right, so here it's saying basically the size is the max width. Basically you're going to set this up based on your screen size. So for each one of these, as it says, you write an image file name, a space, the image's intrinsic width in pixels. Well, you can see how they map up. And it says, notice this uses the W unit and not PX. Okay. Sizes defines a set of media conditions. We're starting to almost look at, and again, this will be written a lot better when we talk about media queries later, that indicates the image size that would be best to choose. I don't do a lot of work with these. I'm not going to lie to you. All right. So again, the media condition, which we'll talk about more in CSS, but this is basically saying that from 0 pixels to a maximum of 600 pixels, or in other words, 600 pixels or less, you're going to be using these. All right. So it says, so with these in place, the browser will look at the device width, and it'll work on the media condition, and it'll map that up with the sizes that you have in there to load the appropriate one. Okay. resolution switching. And again, it may seem like I'm going through this quickly. We're going to talk about yet a better way of doing it, in my opinion, when we get to the CSS section. So if you think I'm not giving them their due, sorry about that. Maybe indeed you're correct. All right. So let's see. It says you can find an example of what this looks like in here. So when we come in here and we start again, you'll notice this is again not at all as we change the size of our screen. All right. So it says in this example, the CSS is applied so that we have a width of 300 pixels on the screen. In this case, sizes is not needed. So this art direction problem, as it says here, as we go on, involves wanting to change the image display to suit different image display sizes. For example, it says a web page with a large landscape, all right, will work fine on a browser, but when you put it on a phone, you'd want to shrink it down. And you might, rather than even possibly wanting it to be a large landscape, you might want it to be a smaller portrait one. So they go through here, and again, they keep changing the stuff in here. And they're saying that with a maximum width of 0 to 799 pixels, and 0 really doesn't make sense. All right, you're going to use this. When it gets over 800 pixels, you're going to use this. All right, that's probably about as simplistic as I can make this. So you'll notice how it's cut this down. It's the same picture, but it's cropped, for lack of better words. All right. It says, why can't we just do this using CSS or JavaScript? Please read this section because it's quite important. When the browser starts to load a page, it starts to download or preload any images before the main parser has started to load and interpret the CSS and the JavaScript. As it says, this reduces load time, but it's not a good thing for responsive images. So we need to implement these using things like source set. All right. Now there are new image formats like Webp, and Webp is actually Google's new format. And in fact, as an example, we have a course in here that AWD 1112 that goes over Java and Android programming. And you'll find that for Android applications, for example, Webp is really what's recommended. There's also AVIF. As it says, these can maintain a low file size and high quality at the same time. All right. Don't use the media attribute unless you also need art direction. In the source element, you can only refer to images that are declared in type. Use a comma-separated list. Again, I'm not going to go over the example here. And let's very quickly look, because we've reached the end except for this Mozilla splash page. So it says here, in this assessment, you will test your knowledge of some of these techniques. So again, they've got to start, and they have you come in and prepare the image and add a few other things to it so that in the end it's going to look like this. Now, I've made the decision, conscious or unconscious, that I'm not going to go through this example. This is one that you can take a look at on your own. Rather, I'm going to continue on, and I have now finished this module, or I should say I have now finished what I'm going to cover in this module. So as I peruse my way up to the top here, and I go back to the the multimedia and embedding, I have now gone through everything that's in here that I'm going to go through. Again, I'm not going to do the assessment. So I've now covered the getting started with the web, the introduction to HTML, and the multimedia and embedding. So next, I'm going to go through HTML tables, which is a short section. There's an overview of tables, some table basics, some advanced features and accessibility, and another assessment. All right, I'm not sure if I'll do the assessment again or not, but I will come back and be going over the HTML tables shortly, and I'll see you then.